In 1953, a man painted a football match, sort of. He didn't paint the players, he didn't paint the score, he didn't paint the victory or the defeat. He painted the walk, hundreds of tiny figures streaming through gray streets toward a stadium in the north of England, their backs to us, their faces invisible. A river of people moving together towards something they all believed in. 69 years later, that painting sold for $7.8 million, and the country it came from fought to keep it. This is the story of going to the match and the man who spent 42 years as a rent collector before anyone called him an artist. Lawrence Stephen Lowry was born in 1887 in Stretford, Lancashire, industrial heartland of England. His father was an estate agent. His mother was musical, ambitious, disappointed. She had wanted more from life. She made sure Lowry knew it. The family moved to Pendlebury in 1909 to a house beside a textile mill. Lowry hated the place at first. He wrote later, "At first I detested it, then I got absorbed in it, then I got obsessed with it." That obsession never left him. Here's the thing about Lowry that most people don't know. He was not a bohemian. He was not a tortured artist drinking absinthe in a Parisian garret. He was a rent collector for 42 years. He walked the streets of Salford and Pendlebury every working day, knocking on doors, collecting shillings from families who had barely enough to eat, and in the evenings he went home and painted what he had seen. After his father died in 1932, Elizabeth Lowry became bedridden. She was difficult, demanding, and she never believed in her son's painting. Lowry would wait until she fell asleep, sometimes past midnight, and then he would go upstairs to his room and paint, every night, for years. Think about that for a second. The man who would become one of the most celebrated painters in British history spent 4 decades working a job nobody writes songs about, living in a house where his art was a source of tension, painting in secret while his mother slept downstairs. He painted what he saw on his rounds: factories smoking, streets wet with rain, crowds pouring out of mill gates at shift change, and those figures, those small, thin, haunting figures that people called matchstick men. Lowry hated that term. He said, "They were people. They were real people. I saw them every day." In 1953, Lowry entered a competition. The Sports Art Council had asked artists to submit works on the theme of sport. Lowry, who had been painting football crowds for years, submitted Going to the Match. He won. The painting was exhibited and praised. But what Lowry had done was something no sports painting had done before, and arguably nothing has done since. He didn't paint the game, he painted everything around it. Look at the painting. A mass of figures moves from the left side of the canvas toward the stadium on the right. They're walking in groups, in pairs, in streams. Some are hurrying, some are lingering. The sky is Lowry's signature gray. Not the gray of sadness, but the gray of the industrial north, where the smoke from 100 chimneys turned the air into something between weather and architecture. And there, in the middle of the crowd, one figure stands still, alone, facing the wrong direction. While everyone else flows toward the stadium, this one person has stopped. They're looking at something we can't see, or maybe they're looking at nothing. Maybe they're just paused. Lowry always did this. In his paintings of crowds, there is almost always one figure who has separated from the group, one person who stops while the world moves around them. Critics have written entire essays about who that figure represents. Some say it's Lowry himself, the observer, the rent collector, who was always on the outside of the lives he witnessed. We'll never know. But that figure changes the entire painting, because without it, Going to the Match is just a crowd going to a game. With it, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a painting about being inside a crowd and feeling alone at the same time, about moving with everyone toward a shared destination and wondering if you really belong. When was the last time you felt that? Walking into a stadium with thousands of people, all wearing the same colors, all singing the same songs, and somewhere inside a small part of you standing still, watching yourself from the outside? That's what Lowry painted, not football, the human condition inside football. In 1999, the Professional Footballers Association bought Going to the Match at auction for $1.9 million. It was a record for Lowry, The painting hung in their headquarters for over 20 years. Then, in 2022, it went to auction again. Christie's, London, May. The estimate was between 5 million and 8 million, but something happened that nobody expected. Before the hammer fell, the Lowry, the museum in Salford built to honor the painter, launched a public campaign, Keep Lowry in the North. They argued that this painting belonged to the people it depicted, to the descendants of those matchstick men and women who had walked those streets, who had gone to those matches, who had lived those gray, smoky, beautiful lives. The campaign caught fire, not because of the art world barely cared. It caught fire because people in Manchester and Salford and Bolton understood something that auction houses and critics didn't. This wasn't just a painting, it was a memory, their memory, the memory of a time when football belonged to them. The painting sold for £7.8 million. The buyer turned out to be a private collector from the north of England who immediately loaned it permanently to the Lowry Museum. It never left. And yet, the story tells us something uncomfortable. A painting of working class people walking to a football match, painted by a man who spent 42 years as a rent collector, became worth more than any of those people could have earned in 100 lifetimes. Lowry himself died in 1976 with an estate valued at just under £300,000. He never owned a car, he never bought a house, he painted in the same small room for decades. The art market did what the art market always does. It turned a human story into a number, £7.8 million, a headline, an investment, but the painting is still there, in Salford. And when you stand in front of it, in person, in the city Lowry painted, in the grey light that he loved and hated in equal measure, you don't see £7.8 million. You see a river of people walking towards something they love. You see the figure who stopped, and you feel it, the ritual, the belonging, the loneliness inside the crowd. The World Cup is happening right now. Billions of people watching. Stadiums that cost fortunes, players who earn more in a week than Lowry earned in a lifetime. And it's easy to forget, in all that spectacle, what football actually is, what it has always been. It's a walk, it's a crowd moving together, it's the stranger next to you who screams when your team scores and who you'll never see again. It's the cold air on your face and the smell of fried onions from a cart outside the ground, and the feeling that for 90 minutes, you belong to something bigger than yourself. Lowry knew that. The rent collector from Pendlebury, the man who painted in secret while his mother slept, he understood something about football that no stadium architect or broadcast executive ever will. He understood that the game isn't the point, the people are. And somewhere on that canvas, among hundreds of tiny figures, streaming toward a stadium in the grey light of a Lancashire afternoon, there's one person standing still, looking the other way, alone in a crowd. Maybe that's Lowry, maybe that's us. Which figure are you? Comment below. I read every single one. Hit subscribe. Next week we return to another masterpiece and the hidden story behind the brushstrokes that makes you feel the art in a completely different way.